Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Rowing Chat. I'm Rebecca Claro, and today I'm joined by Chris Chase from the Saratoga Rowing Association. Welcome to Rowing Chat.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Rowing Chat has some exciting news. We are creating a network of rowing podcasts. Back in 2013, I did the very first Rowing Chat interview with Tim McLaren, the legendary coach for Australia and the USA sweep team. Since that time, there's been around one episode per month published. And now new shows are joining the Rowing Chat platform. We have Faster Masters Rowing Radio, hosted by Marlene Royal, and another called Ready Row USA, whose most recent episode includes a report from the Las Vegas Consumer Electronics Show by the United States coxswain Colette Lewis Conwell about the connected athlete. You can get notified of new episodes by joining our email list at www.rowing.chat. You will be joining the fast-growing, globally connected group of rowing fans, athletes, and coaches. We look forward to having you part of the group. Now, you've heard of intelligence quotient, which of course is IQ, and you've probably heard of EQ, emotional quotient, as well. But doesn't it strike you as odd that there isn't a score given to the health of your body? We row, we take care of our bodies, and although masters athletes love to compare injuries and their recovery strategies, we also know that we're both fitter and healthier than much of the population. So why shouldn't we get financial benefits from our rowing practice, from our fit and healthy bodies? Luckily, Health IQ feels the same way. They're a health insurance company who understand that health-conscious people are a lower risk category, and they offer lower rates for fit and healthy people, like rowers. If you qualify, you could save money. Go get a free quote today at healthiq.com/rowing and mention the promotion code ROWING when you speak to a Health IQ agent. Just ringing and getting the quote makes money for this program and enables us to support all the rowing shows that you enjoy on the Rowing Chat network. So go and reap more benefits from your rowing, and we look forward to seeing you and your friends on the Rowing Chat network in future. Now to my guest. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in rowing.
Well, my name is Chris Chase. I'm from Saratoga, New York, which is about 3 hours north of New York City. We live up in the mountains. As you can tell, we're getting 2 feet of snow right now as we speak. My background in rowing began in 1996. I was a first-year teacher at the high school, and 4 girls wanted to start a new club. The principal basically told them there was no money in the budget, and they'd have to find a sucker that would do it for free. And I fit the bill for that, so that was perfect. I, at the time, was a wrestling coach and had spent most of my teenage years wrestling and messing around with martial arts and just individual sports. Played a lot of sports, but rowing was never on the horizon. Those years, anyways. So in '96, I became a rowing coach. Didn't know what I was doing at all. And since that time, Saratoga has become quite a large team. I'm lucky to have been surrounded by so many, amazing people that made it happen. We're in a very small community, so everybody knows about rowing now. We're under 50,000 people, and we host huge regattas and coaching education conferences and races, and have a team of about 225 kids.
So you started the club from scratch?
Correct.
Huh. Congratulations. And you run just a program for kids, for juniors?
No, we have quite a healthy masters group, and we have an adaptive program. and we actually have programming for kids anywhere from age 4, right on through. So we have in the summer we have sculling camps, 1-week camps, where you can be 4 to 10, and then our middle school program picks up obviously in 10, 11, 12, and they scull as well, which is more European of us than American for sure. And then our masters we have quite 70 or so masters.
And tell us about funding to start.
Did you say funding?
How did you get?
Well, it was the early years were very grassroots. When we started, we were the team that the school was excited for, because all the kids who got cut from the actual sports in school had nowhere to go, and we're a very health conscious community in Saratoga. So they were very excited that we would get all the kids who couldn't make another sport. And because of that, we also had a large influx of parents who were very excited that their kids were going to be active and be part of something. So everything was, we had old wooden boats and fiberglass up your forearms from carrying the oars, and we just had a great time. And the original group of 40 freshman kids, 39 graduated. So it meant we had 4 years of very stable platform of dudes coming in, parents helping. If we needed to build a dock, the dads just showed up on Saturday with hammers and nails and wood. We built a dock, and it was that simple. But as you know, things become much more complicated the bigger you get, and the higher your standards get raised. So we started running regattas because we were lucky enough to have very flat water that rarely gets interrupted. And we currently have a 10-lane race course. I would say that it's safe to say that more than 50% of our yearly budget, it comes in because of regattas.
10 lanes. That's awesome. Is that a river or a lake?
It's called Fish Creek, and it empties from Saratoga Lake down to the Hudson River, 13 miles away. So it is a river that the race course is on.
That's very, very impressive. Now tell us more about what you teach 4-year-olds.
Yeah, well, my sons both rowed at 5, learned how to row singles at 5. We have these. There's a man named Matt Hopkins who this is his program, and he has these little indestructible, hard to flip little cutout boats, the hard plastic boats. And the great thing about 4, 5, 6-year-olds is they have no fear, and flipping is actually more fun for them than the rowing sometimes. And they're not worried about what their friends think. So they're not self-conscious about flipping or being, less than average at it. It's just a load of fun. They splash each other, and as they get better, and they learn so fast. So it's we teach them just to enjoy the water, and it's very instinctive for them. I don't know if you've ever watched weightlifters, but they always talk about how little kids, have perfect form, and we train ourselves not to have it over time. So it's amazing to watch them unfold their bodies because it's just natural for them. But that's what we teach them. We teach them to enjoy the sport for everything other than winning and what your friends think.
And can they swim already at that age for your camp, or do they wear little life jackets?
They have life jackets on. Those age groups have life jackets. And like I said, those boats are hard to flip. And when they do, these little kids are like squirrels climbing a tree. They get back in so fast. There's very little weight to worry about, and it's just hilarious. But it invariably becomes bumper boats, which is great fun for them. And for us, it's not as traumatic as watching one of our racing shells get injured, because you can't. These are so hard. These boats are so hard to break that they just it's a real fun time for them.
So that's a summer.
Correct. Yeah, we are frozen sometime in November, and we don't get back on the water until April. So we have ice and snow and all kinds of good stuff for them to do.
So your regular group that row throughout the year, what do they do in the winter time?
It depends. One of the more complicated things with becoming, a better than average team, I would say, would be so many kids get scholarships, and there's an expectation that they continue to train throughout the year to make their future coaches in college happy, to make, or juniors are working really hard at attaining a time, and reaching a standard that would help them get a scholarship or get into a better school. So a lot of kids will train straight through. The younger kids we encourage to do other sports. We have a cross country team which is ecstatic today with this 2 feet of snow. We have a lot of downhill skiers on the team. We have basketball. I mean, our high school has 42 sports programs, so there's plenty for them to do. And when possible, we encourage them to do other sports, because I would think everybody can agree that a well-rounded athlete is better than anyone that specializes too early. That's an opinion.
No, it's a very. Now, talk about how did you get the skill to become a coach in a totally new sport that you knew nothing about when you were the wrestling coach?
Well, I will say it wasn't that hard. Luckily, rowing is the repetition of a few simple motions over and over and over again. So, I mean, it wasn't like I had to learn 4,000 plays and all these other crazy things. Personally, I think that a great coach, like a great teacher can teach any subject and have the attention of the audience and have fun, and be engaging. And I think a great coach can come with passion every day, and especially one that can say, hey, look, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm learning, and we'll do this, we'll learn together. And so those were the early years. And after that, it was just immersing myself, and there wasn't a person that I didn't have 8,000 questions for. So I'm not sure how annoying I was early on, but the passion to learn more, and even to this day, still learning more, is, I started hosting coaching conferences because that meant that I could bring 25 coaches here, really good ones, and they would keep teaching me more lessons. So it was a never-ending search, and never is, to keep learning.
Tell us about the conference. You just finished one. Who spoke? What was it all about? Who is it for?
The coaching conference is it's a junior conference, but anybody who wants to come is welcome. I wanted things that in the U.S. there are 1,500 plus clubs, and if you went to the convention for U.S. rowing, it was always the national team speakers, and you'd have high school coaches that would copy their workouts, and you can't do national team workouts. So the whole concept of novice rowers and what to do, and high school rowing is very complicated because you're trying to raise money, you're trying to find time on the water, you're trying to build a boathouse or build and travel, and nobody ever tells you about that 90% of coaching has nothing to do with 2 hours in the water. So my conference is a junior conference. We had 225 people, but we had everybody from Chris Korzanowski to somebody talking about novice rowing. So most of the people this year were speakers who are coaches from very large clubs like Saugatuck or CRI or Greenwich. And so when we speak, many times you'll say, well, this is the best way to do it. And somebody will say, well, what about this? Because my club couldn't do that. And there's more empathy coming from a speaker who also has a big club and understands the limitations. You can say, well, try this. This works for us. Or, maybe you don't have 225 seats in your boathouse, but you could rotate like this and do lane training, or you could do this. And so it's geared towards juniors, whether it be volume-based, technical-based, lifting. Everybody in America wants to lift. Nobody knows how to coach lifting. We're rowing coaches. So it's an interesting. Sorry for the interruption. My son's just walked in the house. Sorry about that.
Let's dive into more detail about the actual organization of a club. You tell me you now have 24 coaches on your team. Can you start to give us some of the insights and tips that you alluded to there as to how you have adjusted and adapted to make it work so that some of the listeners can get the ideas that you are also sharing at your conference?
Oh, well, in the 23 years that we have existed, we have had many variations of coaching staffs. The model of constantly getting volunteers, when you're a big team and you've been big for many years, you can't count on maybe you'll have enough volunteers to coach. Maybe you'll have enough. Excuse me for 1 second. So we decided that we would try to invest more in our coaching staff than in our equipment. Um, the vast majority of what we raise or what we would bring in goes towards paying for coaching. And we feel that coaching is the single greatest thing that you can supply. New boats aren't going to make you faster necessarily, but coaching will always, everything from the health of the athlete to the speed of your boat will rely on the level of your coaching. So we put a lot of money and effort into coaching. We tried to make it more professional and sustainable by offering access to benefits, retirement packages, anything that we can do to make somebody who's in a moment where they have to choose, life is coming at them. We try to take some of those limitations off the plate by saying, well, we can get you access to health care, which in America, you at 26, you run out of your parents. We invest heavily. The other thing that we've done recently that doubled our coaching staff is that we have a pre-elite center, and we built it with two things in mind. One would be that many of the athletes in America that want to continue training after college, but can't afford it because they need food and housing and some sort of income, live there. In return, they coach our younger programs and give us a great strength or coach to athlete ratio, and allows us to expand our numbers, and at the same time giving them one coach per boat, which is a Cox quad. So we get to do something totally outside the box in America, which is everybody learns to scull before they learn to sweep, which enhances the longevity of your rowers. I'm sure you know better than most of us over here now.
So why did you choose that strategy?
Well, we realized we had reached a point of critical mass in the boathouse. We realized that it was unsustainable because we did not have enough coaches that returned every year. We'd have kids that would come home from college, graduate, or taking a year off. Invariably, they go back or they move on to the next phase of their life. And if we wanted to continue to maintain what we had achieved, we struggled every year just to maintain the 200 plus kids. In order to sustain that, we had to have a different model. And so we looked at what was needed in the world of rowing in the U.S. U.S. rowing isn't endowed with a huge amount of money. We don't have the lottery paying for anything. So the amount of money that we can put into the team is just over, $2 million or even less than that. And these athletes we were losing to them starting the next chapter. So we decided we had access to a piece of land which served itself for us to put on regattas as a storage place to put all of our launches and all of our regatta equipment. We built a house there, and it has 8 bedrooms upstairs, and the athletes can live there, and we employ them, and they coach the kids. My son doesn't seem to grasp the idea that we're having a podcast, and he's slamming around the house. My apologies.
We'll deal with it later. He can show us
we'll do it
spelling or something. Now, I want to move on to talking about fundraising, because money is never comes easy to a community rowing club. So when you started off, I'm guessing the high school had a small budget that they could give you for the 4 girls who wanted to learn to row. Nowadays, talk about the detail of where your money comes from, how much people pay in their annual subscription, and what you fundraise.
So fundraising is, I think, a massive part of any rowing club in the U.S. But it too is also unsustainable in our experience. When you live in a town of less than 50,000 people, you're going to the same well over and over and over again. So we had some simple rules in the beginning, and that was we would not ask for money from the bank until we had opportunity to build a boathouse. So we waited 8 years before we asked the bank, 9 years before we asked the bank for anything. We do unique things, but we don't. So many people have kids go door to door and ask for money and sell things. Every sport in town's doing that. And we have, 2 hockey rinks and 6 hockey leagues and lacrosse leagues and travel leagues and basketball and volleyball, and they're doing the same thing. And what a tiresome thing to constantly be asking people for money. So we decided that we would do 2 major regattas, or 2 major fundraisers a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. We do a rowathon in the fall, which is your basic, we row X number of miles. The kids get 20 people to support them. And, the average kid brings in about $200 a kid per person. And we should say that, okay, whatever we raise on this is our equipment budget. It's not going to be more than that. And kids, if you are really motivated to be in better boats, well, then here's your chance. But we did not want, we also get a 20-mile practice out of it. So on a day we wouldn't normally get it. So yes, very sneaky, huh? 20 more miles of rowing. So the other thing that we do in the spring is we do a silent auction. And because of the regattas, our town reaps the benefit in terms of millions. For filling every hotel room. We bring 45,000 people a year here for regattas who stay in hotels and eat at restaurants. And so our little town, 1 mile Broadway, makes out greatly. So they donate plenty of stuff for our silent auction, and that silent auction raises money, and the kids never have to go door to door. The kids are so busy now with school and testing and all these other things, taking more time from them is ludicrous, and that's just our experience. So we do 2 major ones. The regattas are the fundraiser for our club year round, and the parents, to be on this team, you must work 6 hours a day at the regattas. It's very simple. I mean, it pays for more than half of all of our needs. So rather than ask you for more money, we ask you for your time. So I would say that our dues are probably cheaper than most. And if you looked at our program, you would say, oh my goodness, you have 2 boathouses and you have a training center and an elite, pre-elite center. You own a 10-lane race course and a truck and 3 trailers, and you have all these things. It must be so expensive to be a member of your club. It's not. It's cheaper than probably 75% of the clubs in the country, but you must give your time. And we turn that time into money.
And tell me, what's the total budget for the year for running the entire program?
Well, thank goodness I'm no longer the executive director, because I am not that skilled at spreadsheets and amortization of roofs and blah, 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 blah. I am the people person and the guy who gets to run around and have fun, because I don't have the responsibilities of organizing all of the equipment and the money and the spreadsheets. We have it's well over $1 million, our yearly budget, but that includes all things in and all things out. So if we travel with 100 kids to nationals, whatever they pay to go to nationals times 100 goes into the budget. So it reflects that it's part of our budget, even though it's an in and an out in a blink. And all the regattas go through the budget, and those, just to start off regatta day, you're at over $60,000. Our regattas are over 2,000 entries for 2 of them. So it's quite a large budget. More than half of it comes in because of regatta money. I don't know the percentages, and I'm probably lucky that I don't know the percentages, because I would mess them up.
Wow.
Ignorance is bliss. Sorry.
You've hinted at coach education.
Yes.
Is a really important part of the setup for your club, obviously, for bringing on these young coaches and giving them a good start. Can you talk us through what's your philosophy of how to train someone to become a skilled rowing coach?
Well, the hardest part is something I don't know if you can train, and that is your interpersonal skills. If you're not engaging to a teenager these days, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what you know, and it doesn't matter if you have 18 Olympic gold medals. If they don't like you, they will shut you out in a blink. So I think what we try to do as the older coaches in the boathouse is to share our experiences with the younger coaches, to always let them know that maybe there's more going on with that young athlete, or maybe there's something more to it, or we don't talk about winning very much. Of course, I mean, with the number of athletes that we have, the number of professional coaches, and the access to all the positives that we have, our club is quite accomplished. But having said that, it's not what we talk about. We talk about rowing as it being a lifelong sport, and that you belong to it and it belongs to you. And if you can row a single, you can always row. So the piece that you find on the water, these are the things that, in short, Rebecca, these are the things that we try to have our young coaches understand. Instead of just trying to go fast, we make sure that they understand that rowing is so much more than any bit of technique or any lift. And hopefully, I mean, you ask about numbers. My proudest number is 48. We have 48 of our athletes have gone on to become coaches. And so I would say, in all modesty, that we're doing something to help people love the sport, that they want to continue doing it when they're done with the winning years, the fun years. So that's probably, in my philosophy, would be the single greatest thing that you can impart, is a love of the sport and what the sport does for you outside of what place you came in.
I echo that. Now, let's talk more broadly about the skill of coaching and coach education in the context of the rest of the USA. Bit of a big area.
Kind of, yeah.
What do you think is the most limiting factor to the future success of the US rowing program, soup to nuts?
Coaches, coaching education. US Rowing just did 2 surveys, and they to their credit, want to know more about their members and what they can be and do for their members more. And in both surveys, coaching education was by far the single greatest thing that members wanted. And it didn't matter if you were a master's rower or a junior parent or a club. It all came back to coaching. How do we get more? How do we make them better? How do we enhance the experience of the athletes, regardless of age, college, whatever? Rowing underwent 20 years ago. Rowing underwent a massive transformation in the U.S. because of Title IX scholarships in Division I rowing to offset American football. Colleges put out, all of a sudden there were 100 Division I colleges with 20 scholarships, give or take. And we didn't have enough athletes to fill those scholarships. So, law of supply and demand, people went nuts for rowing. If you were an athletic young lady and you had 2 knee surgeries already because of basketball, you went out for rowing. Or across the country, we exploded, more than doubled our clubs. The problem was we more than quadrupled our athletes, if not more than that, tenfold. We had not prepared the number of coaches necessary for such an explosion of athletes. And to this day, we are so far behind in prepping new coaches that you'll see the majority of clubs are run by a early 20s person who doesn't have their own life experiences to have such a position, or 19-year-olds who decided not to go to college because their team didn't have a coach the next year and stayed at home and is coaching a 19-year-old coaching 18-year-olds. So you can see the inherent dangers of all of those things. So coaching, lack of coaches is in my opinion the single greatest need in the U.S.
And how are you going to solve it?
Well, instead of complaining, which I was pretty good at in my younger years, I decided to. A coach named Larry Laszlo once said, you can stand back there and complain in the back of the crowd, or you can do something and help. And so I decided on that moment, I would be more. So personally, I host a coaching conference. We had 225 people at. I present wherever I can be helpful, and I encourage others who normally are very quiet and keep their cards close to their vest. I don't want to use the word bully because that's safe sport, I give people a lot of feedback about how they should be sharing their knowledge and be more to their coaches in their regions, because we have 6 regions, 3,200, 3,200 miles from California to New York, and we can't be everywhere. And so the ones out there have an obligation, and the ones in Florida have an obligation, and the ones in the Midwest have an obligation to teach the younger ones. So every young athlete is a future possible coach. And every collegiate kid who enjoyed their scholarship or enjoyed their experience is a possible coach. Every parent whose kid goes on to college but they love the sport is a possible coach, because coaching is the skill, right? The specifics are just details.
There's sadly called Beryl Crockford, and Beryl ran a high school program in the outskirts of London. And she did 2 things that encouraged what you've just described. And they were very straightforward. The first one was that the oldest girls in the school, the 17, 18-year-olds, taught the newest girls in the program for their first few lessons when they were just going in a single for the first time. And it meant that 2 things happened. One was that they began to understand the mechanics of how to teach, a bit of safety, but it had the side benefit that every single girl in the rowing program knew individually by name some of the oldest, most looked up to kids. So the community and the approachability, there were no cliques.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first thing she did. The second, which I thought was equally skillful, was before they left school, regardless of what was happening in their academic life, they all gained a weightlifting certificate as a trainer. So that they could always get a job in any gym, in any town, anywhere in the world, because they had the piece of paper that said, I am a trained lifting coach. And those 2 things, I think, were fantastically good for obviously the lifetime love of the sport and hopefully the introduction to coaching, but also it built this really strong community inside her existing program. And they were the most successful girls' high school for years. Then she went to Australia.
Australia. Well, it's funny that you should say that, because I think inherently there's other things that are benefited. Our seniors coach our Learn to Rows in the summer. The pre-elites, when we started the program, I think they thought this was a transaction. I will coach for you 2 to 3 hours a day. You will take care of my place for housing, and I'll make some money, and I can survive and train for the national team. And easy, we both get what we want. And I don't think that anybody realized that really what happened was very accomplished athletes came to our boathouse every day and taught our youngest kids how to row. And they did it with passion because they still have it, because they're training for the national team. And I don't think that these pre-elites understood that the one thing that's hardest to keep for 4 years of the cycle of training for the Olympics is your energy. And, because it's such a boring grind, especially to be a rower, and what they received from these young kids every day and still receive is that the one thing that young kids always have is they're crazy and they're wild and they bring energy. And so what has really happened is the transaction wasn't a place to stay for an employee. The transaction was they brought knowledge and passion about rowing to young people, and young people imparted fun and excitement and energy to those that were going through the daily grind of practicing twice a day and trying to rest and keep their energy levels up. And that trade-off has been totally unexpected and probably, one of the greatest things that we both received instead of just, clicking boxes.
I'm going to add something to that. When you are training as a pre-elite, not that I ever was, but I did train twice a day for quite a long time. Having to explain something to someone else and make them do it, and then figure out how your explanation is not making them do what you think you told them to do, makes it much better when you are trying to self-coach.
Yeah, your level of understanding has to increase for you to tell a 13-year-old probably 17 times how to do something very simple. But in that moment, aren't you also growing as an athlete yourself? Now we make ours get level 2, and so they do all, level 2 US rowing coaching. They just did that last week, and so they're also becoming much more students of the sport as well while they're training.
So how are we going to make rowing more relevant in the context of the big sporting scene?
This is one of those topics, isn't it, that people have, whether you're a lightweight or whatever, traditionalist. I think that unfortunately the writing is on the wall, and the USOC and FISA have a point, and that is if you can't sell the rowing to the excitement of rowing to the world, then rowing either becomes obsolete or rowing evolves. It has to evolve. These are opinions, by the way. I don't think that watching a 2,000 meter race is as exciting as watching sprinters. And I also don't think, and this is probably easily proven with facts and numbers, that sponsors, and as a rower, you would think, oh, who doesn't want to sponsor a sport where everything is about teamwork and, it's old school values, hard work, nothing is taken for granted. You get what you work for. Who doesn't want to sponsor that? And yet nobody wants to sponsor that. They want to sponsor, Usain Bolt, and dabbing and exciting dunks and basketball and scores. So I think that we have to make it more exciting, and we have to do some things, or some series of things. Maybe we make it more like swimming, where you're part of a team things, or relay stuff. Maybe we need to make it shorter. Maybe we need to do something like Red Bull did with the walk, and you carry your boat and you put it in the water, and it's exciting. And maybe we do something like that, because that captivated even rowers about how crazy those Red Bull races were. Maybe we, I don't know the answer, but I know that if we keep doing what we've always been doing, it's a cliche, right? If you always do what you've always done. And right now, what we've always done is getting us events, limiting events at the Olympics and Worlds. And quite frankly, if you're a young person in the U.S., even if you have access to rowing at 8 years old, lacrosse and soccer score goals. They're exciting. People cheer for you. Nobody's cheering for you in the first 1,000 of the race course, because in the U.S., usually you can't get to the first 1,000. There is no bike paths. So it is a very inward sport in a country that prizes excitement, and Americans cannot stand if a soccer game ends in 0-0, because nobody wins and nobody loses. We have to have winners and losers. It drives Americans nuts, because we are the country of immediate gratification. So we have to change something, right? Something has to change.
There are a couple that may be worth looking at. In Germany, every sport has an interregional league competition. They're called the Bundesliga, because Bund means province. And they've started a rowing one. And the format is city centre sprint races. So any city centre that has a little patch of water that can do 5, 6, 7, 8 abreast, 250, 300 meter races in 8s, fast, furious. They've definitely got winners. And of course, then there's a points thing, and then you go on and you win your local league, and then you go on to the national program where you're representing your province against the others. And they have a Bundesliga for hockey. They have one for, field hockey, for soccer, for everything. And I know that the UK, they're also looking at sprint rowing. But I also think there's a case for unusual rowing. And is it the omnium in cycling, where you have to do a ton of different distances, and you have a collective points that add up. It's a bit like a heptathlon or a pentathlon or a decathlon.
Yes, that would be great.
And on your team, you've got to have someone who can both row, stroke a pair, and they have to be able to race a single. And, so there's a multi-discipline aspect to it. maybe a thing. And I know in Holland they have something called the Heineken Cup, which is a series of different races on, I think it's a 2-day weekend, but I think they have 3 or 4 different races, long, short. And again, fortunately, I believe in Amsterdam, there is a city center location where you can stand on the streets right alongside and see the racing. So I absolutely echo what you're saying. I think rowing needs to be more creative than 2K. And I think we also need to look at different ways of participating. So traditional boat regattas, of which I know a little because I've done a tiny bit, they provide the boats and you turn up with your oars. And when you buy boats for traditional boats, so this is called skiffing. So it's fixed seat, but it's sculling. And they have coxed singles and coxed doubles.
Coxed singles.
Oh, yeah. In a big, heavy, clinker-built boat. Whenever they buy boats, they always buy 2. So that whatever boat you get allocated to race, it is against one which is of an identical age made by the same boat builder at the same time. And so it's really easy to travel to regattas. You don't need a trailer because the boats are there and then the people just show up and then the boats stay on the water and just people switch in and out and the races carry on and carry on. And I think that there is opportunity for a lot of things like that allow, for example, scratch crews. You could be saying, right, we need 13-year-old girls in this tent and, 15-year-old boys, right? You've got 2, I've got 1, this other club has 1. There, we've got a crew together, we'll provide a cox and off you go. And I think that there is opportunity, particularly in junior rowing, where it's often hard for a small club to have 4 kids of the same age and the same sex. In fact, when I coached 10 to 14-year-olds. We mixed them up and we boated crews based on ability, not based on age or sex. So that's fine. You're 18, he's 13, doesn't matter. You're in the boat together because right now, that's where you're at.
Well, at 10 to 14, the girls are bigger than the boys anyways. So, and much better athletes usually. Roland Kropka came over from Germany for the conference and we spent a week in Florida, and he said something interesting. He said that in Germany, that the kids don't just row. Their rowers don't just row. That they're expected to run and swim. And they had like a field. In the U.S., our elementary schools call it field day, where you do a variety of activities. And I always thought, why not a triathlon with rowing? A bike race. So many of my rowing friends, adults, also bike. They love cycling, and so many of them run. Why not a triathlon, or why not swimming? Like pick the 3 that you want. Why not expand? Because running over here is a massive business. It's everybody runs or everybody bikes or everybody does something. Why not mix the disciplines and have different kinds of triathlons or duathlons?
We did a rowing triathlon at Marlow Rowing Club when I was a member there, and I think my name is once on the trophy. I'm really not very good at either running or cycling.
Once is all it takes.
Please, someone find that trophy and send me a photo. And we did exactly that. We had on-water rowing, and the only difference from a regular triathlon was that we stopped the clock after your row, so you had time to safely take the boat off the water and people weren't crashing boats around. And then you got on the bike and the clock started again, but then it went continuously through from the bike through to the run. And then they switched it over, and I think they made it indoor rowing for the rowing, which was a bit of a shame because actually the outdoor rowing was a kind of fun because you could choose what boat you went in, and they basically had an time adjustment handicap system to adjust your time. So I was in a women's coxless 4 and we had to do I think it was 2K out and 2K back. So it was a bit of a distance. And then they adjusted that proportionate to the UK national records, not the world records, and said, right, that's the percentage adjustment. So it wasn't a complicated maths that you had to do. And it made for a really fun event, and quite a lot of the high schools would show up and treat it as an early season fitness.
And rightly so.
Maybe we should do that. That would be quite a good fundraiser to do a try. And you could do it as a team as well. So you could have one person do each discipline if you wanted. So I think, again, potential for a ton of different things. Let's talk about regatta organization, because it sounds to me like you are a very, very skilled organizer. What is the format of the 2 regattas that you run?
Well, we have up to 6 a year. We have 2 very large ones in the spring, and 1 very large one in the fall. The fall in the U.S., fall racing is head racing. So we have the head of the Charles, head of the Fish, head of the Schuylkill, and so on. And in the spring, everything is a sprint. The format of the spring regattas, and it depends if it's the New York State Championship or if it's just the Saratoga Invitational, is 10 lanes wide. So in the New York State Championships, we are limited by what the collection of clubs in the state want to do, and they vote. So normally what we do is every single boat has a time trial, and that time trial ranks them. Top 10 go right to finals. So nobody, you can't say, well, we were 11th, but we could have medaled. Probably mathematically is never going to happen. And then you are ranked from one side to the other so that you are always next to the boat closest to you in time in the time trial. So no matter where in that race you are, in that race course of 10 lanes, if you do it the chevron way, the outside lanes never end up racing anybody, right? Because they get dropped early. But in the way we do it, the 2 slowest boats are always side by side, and that's usually an outstanding race for those athletes. So in terms of, again, enhancing the experience of the athlete. So the Saratoga Invitational is quite large. It's over 2,000 entries. 7 or 8 of the 12 largest clubs in the country are close enough that they make every effort to be there. So outside of youth nationals, it's generally the fastest race in the country. It's the end of April. The other one is the state championship, which actually provides New York State crews with the ability to qualify for national championships. And then in the fall, we do a head race, and the race is only 2 miles, and that is because it's the end of everybody in the Northeast racing season. And for a lot of teams, if your novices just came out, they've only been rowing for 2 months, and you're going to tell them that they just trained for 10 weeks and they got 1 race and it's probably a miserable experience. So what we do is we make it so that you can get 3 races, 2 to 3 races in. And for colleges, for a college novice, usually it's their only race of the year. So that weekend experience could very well be the reason they do or do not come back for the spring season. And so we make the head of the Fish a circus. It's fun. We're always pumping, classic rock, and we have the fish head trophies and big tents, and you can expect miserable weather. And so that's become the trademark joke. It's gonna be freezing rain, and we're gonna be Vikings, and everybody will talk about how they survived last year, next year. And that's quite large as well. And people come from all over for that one. We have 200 clubs or so that join us for that. And the Masters go crazy at that one. They'll get 3, 4 races and maybe 5 in the day if the schedule lines up. They know they're putting their oars away for 6 months of ice. So that's motivation right there.
Tell us about the schedule. How does that work?
Saturday is Masters, collegiates, and open events. And Sunday is all juniors, because Sundays the juniors make up more than half of the entrants. So that's how we separate it.
So basically, as a master, I could do it in my single, and then I could turn around and I could do it in a double, or
you could go, the way it's set up, you could go single, double, quad, and then at the end of the day still make at least one of the mixed events. So we have mixed quads, mixed 8s, mixed doubles. And so if you've been racing against another club or somebody that you're always racing against, if you guys wanted to make a mixed 8, you could. So there's all kinds of ways. I find that the Masters enjoy those moments the most, because although they race each other every weekend and probably have for 20, 30, 40 years, there's nothing better for them than to have a beer with the people they've been racing against for 30 years after the event, or even better, being a mixed quad with 2, people who have been always racing each other. So they have good fun with that.
And you're allowed to.
I'm sorry?
We have been banned from having beer tents at regattas, and you're allowed.
We do not.
Beer tent.
No alcohol. We do no alcohol at the regattas. But there's places close. After coming to the head of the fish has been going since 1986. They all know where to go.
Now, when we were talking before we started recording, you said something very interesting about organizing a regatta, and you said making money drives decisions. What did you mean by that?
Oh, I think the very specific example was in a 10-lane race course. For Saratoga, we want everybody to scull in the U.S. I think that it's pretty easy to see that our athletes don't scull when they start rowing, and European countries and New Zealand and Australia and countries like that, stroke for stroke, pound for pound, are much better rowers. We are always have the best erg averages and rarely have the best results. And that's because my opinion is that our athletes don't have a good water feel and don't. So at Saratoga, we would love to have everybody scull, and every kid on our team can row a single. Now, having said that, if I have 10 lanes and I want to make an event, and time is now the enemy because there's only X number of daylight minutes in the day, to fill those lanes, if I put 10 eights in those lanes, that's 90 kids get out there and get the experience of racing. If I put 10 singles in those lanes, then I get 10 people. So when I made that comment, yes, we would love to see more sculling, and we would love to be an instrument of change in culture for the U.S. And we're trying, but at the same time, the cost of entering an 8 versus the cost of entering a single is much different. And when you're trying to make ends meet for the regatta, you have to keep both things in mind.
So what's the future for regattas?
Well, there's going to have to be more regatta sites created. They're not making any more weekends. The last time I checked, so every month gets 4, maybe a 5th. In the Northeast of the U.S., which is where more than 50% of all U.S. rowing clubs are located, and because we are frozen, our season before nationals comes down to 5 weeks of viable water. And that doesn't include, so by the time we actually get a couple weeks of training under our belts, otherwise we've had times where we've been frozen so long that our first race was our first practice of the year. Last year we got on the water April 17th. 2 weeks later we hosted the Saratoga Invitational. So what is the future of racing? Well, if we had more race courses, more regatta sites in each region, people wouldn't have to travel as much. The cost of being a rower wouldn't be as much, and you'd probably get more people that would join, because I'm certain that cost is an inhibitor of people joining our sport, especially when you have to travel many states away just to get good competition or any competition. So I would say that regionally we need more regatta sites. We need more competent people running races to keep the kids safe, or the athletes, I should say, safe, masters included. And we need to find ways to make them fun. Make it worthwhile. If the average kid is spending $400 a weekend to go somewhere and give up their weekend, their social life, I mean, there's no secrets, right? All rowers know that you lose all that money and social life and time and skin on your hands. If we could find ways to make them more interesting and more exciting for spectator and for athlete, it probably grows even more.
So what ideas do you have for making it more exciting?
Well, I think that the exciting part is a microcosm of what the Olympics are going through, right? Maybe sprint racing, maybe mixing more things, maybe the lure of your kids going to run, bike, and row, or run, swim, and row, would lead some parents to say that they won't be overtraining in one discipline, or overuse injuries, which are very prevalent in the U.S. in all sports. You know, if you're a swimmer or a volleyball player, you have shoulder injuries. If you're a basketball player, you have knee injuries. If you're a football player, you have concussions. Well, rowers have injuries too, right? Backs and knees, the things you need for the rest of your life. So maybe if we did ways to enhance the experience by having more aspects to the competition instead of just rowing over and over and over again. Maybe kids would diversify their training a little bit more. So that's one way to do it. Or maybe we find ways to mix with other sports so that the regatta site or the competition site becomes much more energetic. There's much more energy and more things happening there, and maybe more vendors would be attracted to that. And then you'd have a carnival or something that's fun where parents aren't bored. I mean, what is rowing, right? Especially head racing. Your parent watches the kid go by for 30 seconds, and they've been there for 9 hours. So I mean, maybe there's ways to make everything about it a much more exciting, fun experience for everybody involved. That would be some of my suggestions.
Fantastic. Tell me about how you got into making trophies, because the head of the fish has some very unique prizes.
Well, the head of the fish trophies were first made by Tom Frost in 1986. So I certainly cannot take credit for that. They started the head of the fish. They were masters, and they started the head of the fish to raise beer money for their social habit. And it was fun. They wanted new boats for their fledgling club, and we had a great stretch of water. So medals and trophies were expensive, and still are, and defeated the purpose of buying all the trophies and all that if you're going to spend all the money you made just on awards. So they decided to make some, and Tom is an architect, and he was really into like Egyptian embalming and stuff. And he said, well, I can make a couple of these things, and he called them fish heads. And they would take fish that were free, you just had to catch them, and then he would basically embalm them and then paint them and affix them to a piece of wood, and that was your trophy. And they were so unique, and the fish was it was like a mini Woodstock, and it was such a laid back, hippie kind of regatta that it just grew in fame because of its uniqueness. It wasn't old and stuffy. If anything, they had one rule, and that one rule was that there were no rules. And you could find a keg, nearby, and they didn't take themselves too seriously. And I think that in the stuffy world of rowing back then, before Title IX hit and it became mainstream, it was a sport of Ivy League colleges and prep schools, and it wasn't a sport that was mainstream. So I think that they were fun, and he made fish heads, and it was sort of their thumbing their noses at tradition that made it exciting. And so he made these crazy fish heads, and that when we took over the regatta for them, because I of course had hundreds of volunteers and they had 8 people in their club, we merged, and we got to take their idea and their history of owning it and couple all of our kids and our adults, our parents, to do all the work. And the race tripled in size in 3 years. So but I took from that, I always loved how people really respected that they were handmade, that the trophies were handmade. Tom, for the big trophies, he carved them by hand, and he put little lights in them, and they would spin, and he was so crafty. So and I'm not nearly as skilled as him. So now for all of my regattas, I make the trophies. So if I find things at auctions or yard sales, or if I find things at TJ Maxx or Hobby Lobby, I'll buy bases and make trophies. So for the coaching conference, everybody had handmade trophies, and they're just things that you pick up at Pier 1 that are really cool, or that you find in a yard sale somewhere that are really cool. Pieces of glass, crystal, and there you have it.
Fantastic. The head of the fish, do you keep your trophy forever, or do you have to return it each year?
No, they're real fish, so they retain their unique smell, and you can have them. You're welcome to have them. And if you leave them outside, they're birds and animals will try to eat them. They're real fish. So no, and I think we'd have a riot if we asked people to give them back. They're quite expensive to make. The irony is how expensive they are to make them. They're like $65 a piece to make them. But each one is unique. Every single one has different decorations, different paint jobs. For the older master, the veterans group, we put little wispy beards on them and spectacles, and they're just crazy. We put Mr. Potato Head, little arms and biceps, and you name it. And so the beauty of each one is in the eye of the person who made it. And there may or may not be beers at the decorating night. So the longer the night goes, the more crazy the fish get. And no matter what, the one you win is always the most. It's like your own child, right? Your child's always beautiful to you, no matter how ugly they might be. Same thing with your fish head trophy. The uglier, the better. That's yours. So yeah, no. We make 120 of them every year, and people fight tooth and nail to get them.
Well, that's I should come over for some embalming lessons.
Yeah, why don't you come over for the race and we'll get you a fish head. I think you need a fish head on your wall right there.
I think you're right. I do. I'm not sure how long it would last, though, especially if it gets smelly.
True. Good point.
Chris, it's been a delight talking to you. Please tell the listeners where they can connect with you online.
Email would be the best. It is chaserow1@gmail.com, and that's CHASEROW1@gmail.com. You can find me on any of the web pages for the regattas or Saratoga Rowing's website. And I have a Google Drive of 20 years of collecting rowing information. It has about 2 terabytes. If you ever want anything fun, let me know.
Well, that is a very, very generous offer, and thank you. I think I shall be the first to sign up for my question.
I have your email. I'll put you in right now.
Now, RowingChat is part of the RowingChat network, so get email notifications of new shows as they publish by joining our mailing list. You can sign up at www.rowing.chat and listen to the other shows in the network wherever you get your podcasts. I've been Rebecca Caro. Till next time, goodbye.